As the wheel turns, so do the days of our rides. With that, it's my opinion piece of what we've seen or have been seeing in the cycling industry. And there's kind of about 4 or 5 perspectives of just the general state of the cycling realm. As we're going into the fall season, this has some pretty, I would say, catastrophic forecasting for a lot of big manufacturers and supply chains and so forth. We haven't seen anything, haven't seen nothing yet. We're still floating on the coattails of a little bit stronger economy. A lot of inventory left over from the development of pushing product out for after COVID, those particular things, and we've had some serious disruptions, and it's made a lot of companies scratch their head and basically pull back a lot of shipping products development and all that into the United States specifically. So if you're watching this from out of the United States realm, sorry. It's one of those things that nobody really knew how crazy this would get, and it just seems to just keeps going. A small perspective of mine, working with some of these or larger companies, you see the pain. You've talked to the reps, you've met the CEOs, and I've met John Burke at one point through my travels. I'm sure I've met some upper-ranking individuals at Specialized and Giant and so forth over the several decades I've worked, and you have to put yourself in their shoes a little bit. The greed train is over, as some people are really still miffed about how the cycling industry has formed the last 20 years, but it's basically they have to get back to grassroots. And one of the big issues is supply chain and how they're going to consolidate. Consolidation is going to be huge for a lot of these companies, and we're already seeing that. Like yesterday, I saw Muc-Off is going to be sold through QBP, which is Quality Bike Supply. So if you don't know the back end of this, if you're just a cyclist, Quality Bike Supply is one of the vendors that we purchase a lot of our parts and stuff. That's where also we get Surly's and is it Surly? Yeah, Surly's and a couple other brand bikes, but mostly it's just your bread and butter, suspension, cables and housing, tubes and tires, and so forth. Well, they brought on Muc-Off, which is a pretty big brand of cleaning supplies and various other bits, and that's just a prime example of their kind of supplying to all these different vendors is going to focus on one and just kind of clean the pipeline going into this next season with all the disruption that's been going on and trying getting product into the United States, the big T word. With inventory being so questionable, because a lot of the disruption, some of these companies saw it in the tea leaves after the election, and they stocked up, filled up their warehouses and so forth within the United States, and hopefully they had the right inventory or got it in before everything hit. And with that, the company is stressed to the point where they have to start looking into partnership with other companies for pipelining their inventory, or vice versa, or some are just going to go out of business. And there's a lot of disruption where companies have been doing that the last couple of years, but it's already been volatile for the cycling industry in that perspective. Europe's seen a lot of that hits. Some of the brands are like Wiggle. They had like 4 or 5 brands. They've had some liquidation. The names got sold out. They're owned by others, and there's been some shifts there. Pond Holdings has been buying companies for a while, and now they're kind of been shelving, like they shelved GT within the last year. So those are the supply chain consolidation, how we're going to work this, how we're going to push through products in and hope for the best. And at the end of the day, hope to get the products to the consumers and to the bike shops without too much price disruption and quantities disruption. So we've had that obviously through COVID globally, that things shrank up, and we don't want to see that. And also what's been curbing the market is the slowage of selling high-end bikes to mid-range bikes, and new bike sales have dropped, but used is increased a little bit. and service is blown up. Everybody's getting their bikes that they currently have, and they're fixing those and riding them. They're going to hold off on buying anything new. So with that in mind, consolidation of a lot of supply chains are going to consolidate down. Also, closing warehouses, streamlining those. There's been a couple of those in the Bicycle Retailer magazine. This guy, Industry News. It's not all in the paperback. It's also online. I do have a link in the description below. You can read on some of those articles there that reference that. Warehouses are consolidating, closing, that kind of thing. And that's been going on. I mean, it's not, or vice versa. Opening warehouses has been very small. So what Specialized did in the last year or two, and this is something big for them, they were renting a warehouse space in Utah, and they had a building built that they owned. They made it big to a point where they can bring on some other brands and be a distributor as well as their own brand of Specialized and their products. So that being said, this consolidation has been a pretty big alteration and thought out plan before everything hit this year, but that's kind of probably elevated a lot of moves a little bit faster than anticipated. The second big thing that we're looking at is inventory reduction efforts. This is not new. Trek had a memo leaked from John Burke about reducing their SKUs by 40%. Working in several Trek stores over the millennium decades, they had way too much stuff. Too many, I mean, you got a pair of gloves and you got 14 colors, for example. It was just way too much. Or they had 18 different models of gloves, which you really just needed 4. And being an inventory manager and listening to the buyers in the shop buying from these various companies, and like, and it's usually a dollar amount per category they have to hit, but they had too much. They're like end all be all of everything. And they realized that was a huge Achilles heel for their business because they had too much money invested on too much product that was sitting there, i.e. a lot of stuff started getting discounted and flushed out. Because what the cycling world likes to do is, we got the new thing, like every year, bike show, new thing this year, and usually something across the whole line, from bike gloves to bicycles. It's just, they always had to try something new, the new model year, to kind of jazz people up to buy more new stuff and providing that Kool-Aid, right? So inventory reduction was hit pretty hard amongst other aspects of that business. That is, I would say, across the board with all other industry manufacturers or design companies that have product coming into the United States, whatever you want to call them. I'm not a business expert, but I'm a bike shop mechanic, part owner, expert. So my perspective of this, it's a hot mess for them, and they've been reducing that prior to our latest issues. So reducing that inventory, what is that going to mean for you as the consumer and you as the bike shop? Well, maybe not as many things to pick from, so you're not going to have 5 different tubes types to choose from for doing your service, which is probably a good thing because you got to reduce anyway. So everybody's all on the same page. We got to scale down the quantities of what we need or different types, and then just go narrow and deep. And what narrow deep means, instead of just having 1 or 2, 1 to show, 1 to go product on the peg hook on your wall, is going to be more of a big push of, we have 45 of these, and we're going to hopefully sell through them and get 2 to 3 turns a year off of them. Okay, I got probably lost in the weeds, and some of you are just cyclists. I just go in the bike shop and get a pair of gloves. Well, that means like, well, not maybe as many variety, but they're still going to have gloves. But the flip side on that is they're going to be more expensive, most likely. Either or, they've already popped the price on them to bring them up to anticipation, or using an excuse of the big T word, or they are actually starting to pay those tariffs, and then they have to adjust for that. A lot of these companies are eating a portion of that to keep the MSRP down, but that's going to be a huge issue. So what are they going to bring in? They're going to bring in stuff that they know that sells. It's rock bed inventory. So that's going to be the huge perspective going into 26 and 27, because quite honestly, people, when they do these orders and so forth overseas, they're not going to stop buying from Taiwan, China, Vietnam, Cambodia, and also the European markets from Italy and various other countries to get product in. That's just not, to switch that flip that switch to do that, to have everything built within the isolationism of the United States, of just building it all here, is a 5 to 10 to 20-year plan. It doesn't happen in 2 years. So we're going to still have to have inventory come in for the next half a decade to a full decade. So that's where people get kind of confused. Like, well, and then the companies make a plan for the next year. Well, that's a year out, right? So it's like, okay, they're already starting to do pencil work for 27. Like, okay, this is what we're gonna adjustable on the fly if need be, but it's going to be a line plight, and there are agreements with these companies or how much product and what kind of product is going to be altered quite a bit, and have a flexible portion of it. It not just hurts the companies in the United States. They're trying to bring in, it hurts all companies trying to put it in products anywhere or have them manufactured. So there, you're going to have some reduction of inventory, big time for sure. On a little bit lighter note, the e-bike sales are still up. You know, you love them or hate them. Don't like getting buzzed by somebody that's not pedaling on the bike paths or the trails, what have you. It's here. It's here to stay. It is something that's still selling. It's the bikes that are selling for a specific, a decent price. So therefore, there's some of a margin to work with. Also, it's a huge opportunity for a lot of shops to shift gears, get trained up, and do multiple e-bike services. There's been a plethora of kind of junk pushed into pretty everywhere, and we got to be mindful of that. And bike shops, we're going to help you navigate if it's safe. And if you're thinking about buying, before you click that, yes, I want that bike, check with your local shop to see it's something that they actually would work on. Because if it's not a company that can get serviceable parts from, you might be dead in the water if that thing comes in. And getting hold of some of these companies, they're usually a foreign company, where it might be really hard to get replacement parts and so forth and service from them. So be mindful of that. That's a kind of a warning and cautionary tale of pretty much buying anything online. Direct to your home. So if it's not a brand that's a very big, familiar brand, you might think about that. But the e-bike perspective is definitely helped a lot of shops out to do service, even if they sold their own e-bikes or they're servicing others, gone down to even scooters and so forth. Go Guava is another channel. They have a shop in Pennsylvania, I believe, and they just went in deep with it. Now they have a whole bunch of different brands, and he has a good few videos on going through the woes of. He's a new shop. He's like 2 years old, so it's one of those things where it's really interesting to see the perspective of a newbie going in, going, crap, and doing those on adjustment flies. You can't be a stick in the mud at any of our business right now in the cycling industry, because your market may change, and if you're not changing with it, you're not going to be there later, most likely, because there's not a lot of money right now in bigger ticket items to help bike shops make that huge profit, but there's a huge amount of service, and that's where e-bikes come in play on that. And if you have those connections with all those different brands and have the certifications from like Bosch and so forth, those would really help. I do have a buddy, Josh. He has Precision e-bike, which is in Fort Collins, Colorado. That's all he does is e-bikes and e-bikes repair. He's been doing e-bikes for the last 20 years. So this is nothing new to him. So his experiences and insights are just huge. And he's already brought to my light of like, well, some of the stuff I can't work on or I won't work on because of X, Y, and Z. I can't get hold of the company, can't get the parts, it's not safe, that kind of thing. Or, then on the flip side of it, you got to make sure you have the insurances and all that. So in the business model of it, I'm not insured. I don't think my insurance policies cover e-bikes and that kind of thing. So I'm limited to just the regular mechanisms of bikes, like the shifting and the brakes, and not the motors and the batteries and so forth. But if you're a shop that's starting off, or if your local shop is just getting into doing more e-bike service and so forth, if they're on it, or are they looking forward to getting into more of that service opportunity, that's going to be a change. So the industry has shifted on the front lines there. As in those companies like Trek and Specialized and Giant, well, they're still producing them, even though they're going to shrink down the volume that's coming in because their sales are slowing, and they still have them, but they're going to probably put more money into the e-bikes than they're probably into the race teams. Let's put it that way. Because what is race teams making them money right now? Not much, because nobody's jazzed to go buy a $10,000 bike because they're worried about losing their job next week. So, or everything else has gone up, so they're kind of worried about, everybody, the common woes of a downturn and direction of the economy. So that's what we're looking at that. But anyway, that is a positive note. It's still business for the cycling community, and there's a lot of different perspectives just to throw out there for people that are riding e-bikes. There are those who just need something to keep up with their buddies, those who just need to be inspired to go a little bit further, or commuting and so forth. It's not these jack wagons that just blast as fast as they can, which there are a few on the paths, but most of them, more often than not, are just people who just want to get out there and ride. And I think it's a positive in some perspective, because those individuals may not even be riding bikes if it wasn't for that electric assist bike. So therefore, but you still have the other elements. But then again, any category, you still have wankers out there that are going to make it bad for everybody else, or this bad stigma. I mean, mountain bikers, we destroyed the trails back in the 90s. Road guys, we're like 4 or 5 abreast, taking up the whole lane of the road and not being mindful of traffic. Things of that nature. And we've all probably done a little like bad cycling behavior at some point, but most of us just like riding. And for myself, I scaled down to mostly just bike path riding. Reason being is I have a ton of paths and I don't need to be on the road. And quite honestly, even though if I'm right, I'm still going to be dead if I get hit by a car. So any case, I just want to go out there and have a good time and enjoy it. There's still a lot of cycling events. My charity rides and races and so forth are still going forward, but they did see a pretty decline of attendance, but that's going to through the last year or two. But this year we saw a little bit of a bump, so I think you're going to see more people engaging into the community portion of it versus the racing portion of it. But it may be different in every market. Please comment below if it's what's been working in your cycling community, and please share for sure. Strategic partnerships. So like we said, like Muc-Off going into QBP. That's strategic. And there's going to be a lot more of this going on. A lot of companies that find themselves, they may have been competitors, may not be competing anymore. Or find more common threads that we need to help each other out to either provide products to bike shops, or more shops working together to do events or community. And we've already seen that on the ground level with those local shops. I mean, I could have a bike shop right across the street and we'll be the best of buds. Back in the 90s, we would hate each other. So that environment has completely changed in a lot of cases. Not all, but a lot of cases. So a lot of companies are starting to buddy up a little bit. Will Trek and Specialized get together? Most likely not. But when you're looking at some other companies, maybe smaller brands, and this is where we kind of saw in the 90s too, where Trek they acquired, but it was a partnership with some of these brands like Gary Fisher, Greg LeMond, Bontrager, there's they picked up like 5 or 6 different brands, and some of those were like, oh, we want a partner, and some of them were like, you're acquisitioning us. So, but I think in this particular state of market that we're in, especially in the States, that a lot of companies might be working with each other, also working with other companies abroad. So if they have a partnership with a company in Canada for warehousing inventory and so forth and helping stuff shift around, believe me, they're going to get creative as much as possible to kind of sustain the damage and already they've already endured, and then try to manipulate or partnership with companies, and even with the companies that are producing the bikes for them, where they stiff-armed them during the COVID, where like you need to buy or have us make X amount or your orders get down the line. That's how we got too much inventory, because there were a lot of those companies were leveraging the demand, like, you know, Specialized, you got to build so much of this. Trek, you got to buy so much of this, or your orders get put down the line, we'll build it for somebody else, that kind of thing. So they're on their heels too, because when you look at the Bicycle Retailer Industry News latest article about Giant and Merida, Merida owns 30 to 35% of Specialized. So that's a good reflection of how Specialized is holding up. They're probably fine, but as a company, they've done some restrictions to cut off some limbs to help themselves out, closing various experience centers, which was in the news, a couple offices and so forth. And so they're shrinking down. Oh, crap lovers, as I call them. And same as, you know, Giant, which produces a lot of bikes, probably Trek, and various others. And they're not all in Taiwan. They've actually they've moved their warehouses and facilities to Vietnam and Cambodia as well as some in China. So it's kind of, you know, that reporting of them being down in the last quarter is definitely being reflective of how their behavior is going to be towards these companies they're going to ask to have product made. More flexibility, more timeline adjustments. Oh, don't ship it to this warehouse, send it up to Canada or Mexico, or send it to the European market. They're going to be more flexible, not hardline of doing those things. I'm not an expert of it, but I know people that have been in those circles, and that's kind of the perspective of what's been trickled down. So call it muddy water if you will, but that's what it is. That's what I'm seeing. In any case, that's pretty much the big topic news-ish that's being generated from the last week or two, and therefore we're hoping for the best. We're licking our wounds from the season, and hopefully these companies will be, I hope they're strong enough to get through these disruptions and learn the golden rule that basically build stuff for people what they want, not force what they think they should have. Come on, listen to the bike shops. Listen to the customers. Like, I don't need that $10,000 bike. Can you bring in an entry-level bike for $500 that's actually decent and it has warranties and all that other stuff to come with it? Can you do that? So those are kind of the questions that are going to be going up the line, and I'm sure they're being heavily discussed in many boardrooms and many companies. So in any case, well, there's that. Thank you for watching the latest installment of the top news of As the Wheel Turns, So Do Days of Our Rides opinion piece. Hopefully you got some insights of what a perspective of a bike shop is with the current events that are going on around them. Yeah, it's still a little muddy waters, but you know, week in and week out, we try to do our best and navigate that for our customers and our community. Well, in any case, thanks for hanging out with me in the garage. If it's nice in your neck of the woods, please go for a ride. Until next time, have a wonderful day.